Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'll be discussing sex tourism and trafficking for Health Science 425, Human Sexuality and Sex Education. What is human sex trafficking? It's a dangerously modern form of slavery, a booming million-dollar industry. Sex trafficking occurs when someone uses force or fraud to cause a commercial sex act with an adult, or causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act. A commercial sex act includes prostitution, pornography, and sexual performance done in exchange for money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothes. Human sex trafficking occurs globally. Russia, Africa, China, Iran, and North Korea have some of the highest rates of human trafficking, especially sex trafficking. Victims' origins are reflected on the map, with Africa and Asia reporting the highest, and Europe following. Human sex trafficking thrives because there's a high demand, especially amongst males. Males make up 90% of all buyers. The buyer fuels the market with their money. The victim includes both boys and girls who are bought and sold for profit, and the trafficker or pimp exploits victims to earn revenue from buyers. It's more common than you think. The average age of a person entering into sex trafficking is 14 to 16 years old, often too vulnerable and naive to understand the situation or have the strength to overcome their trafficker. Girls account for 90% of those exploited. The International Labour Organization estimates there are 4.5 million people trapped in forced sexual exploitation globally, which accounts for about 20% of all human trafficking. Despite its severity, many fail to realize that sex trafficking occurs on U.S. soil. Approximately 300,000 Americans are victims, with one-third of those victims being of Latin American descent. Pimps often target young children who are runaways, homeless, or victims of abuse. 1 in every 6 runaways has a high risk of being lured and exposed to sex trafficking. These traffickers promise protection, adventure, love, home, and opportunity. Tina Front, a victim, says, "Our quota was 500, and I had made 50 that night to give back to the pimp. As a result, he beat me in front of the other girls to make an example out of me, and then he made me go back until I'd made the money. This is the same man that took me out to eat, listened to me when I wanted to complain about my parents, gave me words of advice. I was now seeing a side of him that I had never seen before." Victims, even children, are often asked, "Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just try to escape?" But traffickers use violence, fear, threats, and intimidation. Often people have no one to run to and no place to go. They are dependent on the support of their abusers. They are emotionally belittled and physically abused. Nearly 90% are raped. Children are the most vulnerable, yet many children are still charged with child prostitution. They are often unidentified and misidentified, so they are often not properly treated. There are various organizations that are dedicated to ending sex slavery and assisting the victims of sexual exploitation, one of which is Shared Hope International. They recognize that the needs of these victims are often not met and survivors do not receive the assistance they need. Their mission involves the following 4 goals: to teach minors tactics of traffickers so they can avoid dangerous situations, to train professionals how to interpret the signs of trafficking and to identify the victims, to help the victims by informing, funding, and connecting them with the right services, and finally, to bring buyers and traffickers to justice for their crimes. Another aspect of Shared Hope International is Gentlemen's Club, a subunit geared towards men. It focuses on educating yourself and others in your local community, teaching boys and girls the dangers, and using that gained information to do something about it. It's important to remember that there is help. If you suspect someone is a victim, reach out, and remember to avoid judgment. Sex trafficking is an emotionally and physically abusive environment. Victims are tormented and exploited and often face years of emotional distress. Help end sex slavery, because no one deserves to have their innocence taken away from them, exposed, and forced to perform unwanted sexual acts.